Hillel the elder said to his disciples when going to eat that he was going to perform an act of kindness to a poor, miserable creature. So you might think that he was going to go, give some poor, miserable creature, a little tuna or something. But what was he referring to? To his body. Because it was like a stranger to him in the sense that it was not his core identity. So we learned that with a tzaddik, their sense of self is not the animal soul. Their sense of self is the godly soul. In the case of a tzaddik, his body and flesh are energized by the divine soul alone, since the evil within his energizing animal soul, dressed in his flesh and blood, has been transformed to good. In the case of tzaddikim, the transformed animal soul has been completely absorbed into divine soul's holiness, meaning they do not experience themselves in terms of self and consciousness as the animal soul. They identify as the godly soul. We said with a Beinani, the Moda'ani is God, the soul you placed within me. So there's a me, and then there's the soul. There's this animal soul, that's just my real self, and then there's this loftier part of myself. But with the godly soul, with the tzaddik, they identify their innate sense of self and being is the godly soul. Why? Because the animal soul has been elevated to such a place that it really is just this pure, pure, pure vessel for the godly soul, and the animal soul is completely transformed into good. The animal that being said, still remains the access point for the body, even in a tzaddik, right? It's not like they don't need a body anymore and they're just like these floating beings. No. Nevertheless, the tzaddik's animal soul ceases to have an identity of its own since it's been utterly transformed to good. It has now become absorbed and incorporated into the structure of the divine soul. It's completely ibn begever. It's completely given over. It is a chariot to its master. It is completely given over to the will of the tzaddik, meaning a tzaddik's urges or impulses are coming from their divine soul. They're not coming from their animal soul. Meaning, I might want to have a glass of water because my animal soul wants water. And really, my divine soul wants to say a blessing. Well, that's concealed. I just experience myself with wanting water. For the tzaddik, they experience themselves through the lens of the godly soul. And therefore, they want to say a blessing. And therefore, their body responds in turn with its desire, with the soul's desire, and becomes thirsty. And there's actually one area in halacha, maybe others, where we take on the status of a tzaddik in this way. Because if you only eat a minimum amount of bread, kazayit, we still say the Birkat HaMazon, the after blessing on bread. But technically, we say in the prayer, V'chalta v'savata, you should eat and be satisfied. So technically, you should only say that prayer if you're satisfied. But what if someone eats that amount of bread? It's not a lot. And they're not satisfied. So how are you allowed to say that prayer? Seemingly, you're going against what the blessing's asking you to do, which is bless God if you're satisfied. So if you're not satisfied, there's no mitzvah to do that. And yet our sages instituted that even after kazayit of bread, we do bless God in the prayers of Birkat HaMazon. Because, why? According to Chassidus, the soul's desire to praise God is so strong that it causes the person to feel satisfied even from that small amount of bread. Meaning the soul is so much the identity that it actually has its influence on the body. And so that's more of the tzaddik experience, where the consciousness of self is the soul, and the animal soul is more a means to carry that out. Versus with us, we experience our soul more of a super conscious way, versus the body and the animal soul is our reality. But in the case of a Beinani, since the energizing animal soul dressed in his flesh and blood has a deep core of Sitra Achra, which hasn't been transformed to good, that constitutes the Beinani's actual identity. Okay? So because the animal soul has not been transformed, it is the main feeling of self. Versus, like we said with the tzaddik, their main feeling of self is the godly soul, because the animal soul is just completely nullified and given over as a tool for the godly soul to use in the case of a tzaddik. Versus, the Beinani still feels his animal soul, because not being transformed to all good, still feels it as its own independent identity very strongly.